Hi, my name is Henderson, and I'm here to guide you through Camping Skills 1. So in this segment, we're going to cover topics 5, 8, and 12. So in 5, it asks you for your personal gear. So I've collected what I would take on my weekend campout. So I've got a sleeping pad, a sleeping bag, a tent, a mess kit. I've got my water, very, very important. Bringing my Bible. I have a phone, which does several things as far as location as well as taking great pictures. Okay. Inside my bag, I've got my toiletries, first aid kit, warm clothes if I need them, a shelter if I need it, an extra one. Got a hat to keep warm. Got extra clothes if I need them. Also with me, I have a knife. I have several ways to make fire. I have some bug repellent. I brought food along with me. I have a pair of gloves. And a headlamp or flashlight. Wanted to take a moment just to talk specifically about clothes. What you bring on with you is very important. If you're camping during the summer, most of the time you're going to be in shorts and t-shirts. That's really good for the daytime, but when it gets dark, temperatures can drop, and depending on where you are, they can drop significantly. So what may feel nice and warm during the day could be very cold at night. So I always recommend bringing warm clothes, a hat especially, some warmer socks or thick socks, an extra layer on top, which can be a jacket, a fleece. These are very vital to being comfortable and staying warm at night. The type of material that your clothes are made of is also very important. A lot of these new technologies have wicking, which brings moisture away from the body, which cools you down and also keeps you warm. So the type of material is very important. Here I have a cotton t-shirt. It's 100% cotton. This is okay if it's summer, if it's warm, but come wintertime, if this gets wet, it takes a long time to dry out. Okay? So what's going to do is actually going to cool your body down much faster. So wintertime and cold conditions, I don't recommend cotton. A lot of times is synthetic or water repellent material. These work really well. They dry quick, so they'll keep you warm or they'll keep you dry depending on what environment you're in. I wanted to take a moment here and discuss each of the items that I brought out of my bag. First aid kit, very vital. You never know what you're going to encounter on a weekend camp out or even just a hike in the woods in the afternoon. So medical kit, first aid kit is very important. Here I've got toiletries, like I mentioned. Okay, inside I've got toilet paper, I've got hand sanitizer, and I've got some other like wet wipes that just come in very handy. Again, you never know when nature is going to call, and so being ready and prepared is very, very, very helpful. Here I've got a Bible. Again, this is extremely important. We all know how God works in each of our lives, and it's just really good to be able to come into nature and be able to read His Word as well as experience and just find that quiet solitude. So a cell phone. Most of us carry one these days, and it kind of serves as a multi-tool. Everyone has a flashlight, has the ability to call for emergency services. It can provide beautiful pictures and videos of your trip. Keep in mind though that it is a battery. And so if you're out for an extended amount of time, you're going to need a way to keep that battery charged, to keep that tool functioning. Headlamp, again, beautiful tool to help with nighttime activities, whether you find yourself in the dark without a camp, or you're around a campfire and you're just trying to cook your meal. So headlamp is very, very helpful. Again, it's battery operated. So check your gear before you take it with you. Make sure that those batteries are either brand new, refreshed, and check your function. Gloves. I always like to bring a pair of gloves with me. You never know what you might need to pick up or grab, and they're just very helpful in keeping your hands protected. I've got an extra ground cloth here. This can be used easily for either on the ground or above, and it just comes in handy. It's very lightweight, very small. I have a sleeping pad. This is extremely helpful in insulating yourself from the ground. Having a knife is very important. It's a crucial piece of equipment, and later on we're going to go over the safety and maintenance of a knife. Have a tent or a shelter that protects you from the elements. We got a sleeping bag, keep you nice and warm at night. Water is very important, it keeps you hydrated. Mess kit, it doesn't have to be this complex, it can just be a simple bowl, but you definitely want to have something that you can eat with. And then obviously food and prepare your meal. Having a way to carry all this gear is really important, and a backpack provides that for you. Keeping all your gear organized and hopefully dry is very vital as well. Camping sanitation is very important. It keeps you healthy, keeps your friends happy, and anyone else that may come to the area after you keeps them healthy as well. So, nature's call. It happens to all of us, and if you're in a campground, most campgrounds provide a bathhouse for toilet use and whatnot. Please use that. Obviously, you don't need to go and use the woods. Making sure that you're brushing your teeth, making sure you're washing your hands, your face, and making sure you take a shower. All very good parts of personal hygiene. Just because you're out in the woods doesn't mean that goes away. Keeping yourself healthy is actually more vital in a wilderness situation than it is at home. Because if you get sick in the woods, you may not be able to get to a hospital quickly. In primitive camping, where there's not an established bathhouse or toilet, you're going to need to either build a latrine, which is a hole in the ground that you can use over and over again, or cat holes. If you're not familiar with a cat hole is basically a 6-inch hole where you dig in the ground, answer nature's call, and then cover it back up. So those can be used single use. Those are not designed to be used over and over again. One thing that I take with me is, like I mentioned before, is my toiletry bag. Okay? This is a waterproof bag because no one likes wet toilet paper. So I've got some wet wipes with me, toilet paper, some hand sanitizer. Okay, this is great just afterwards, but I always recommend going and washing your hands as soon as you can with soap and water. Another tool that I use is a little digging knife. If I'm out in a remote area, I don't want to be using my normal knife to dig in the ground. I want to protect that and keep that sharp. All right? So I have a little digging knife, and this helps with not just answering nature's call, but will help with gathering wild edibles if I need them, or digging a fire pit, whatever I may need to dig in the ground with and not damage my knife. All right, in this segment we're going to be covering topics 2 and 15. When we go to an established campground, it can be important to be considerate to other campers. And this can be in the form of how loud we are, how much noise we create. If we're in an area where there's a lot of people around us, we want to try to keep keep the noise level down. We don't want to be blasting music and doing all kinds of different things. So noise is very important. Also, to make sure that you're not walking through other campsites, okay? You've gone there, you've rented your space, use the designated paths, use the roads, whatever's provided to you by the campground. Don't be cutting through. It may take you a little bit longer, but it's respectful. Colors can also be important. Some people get away from the city to enjoy the greens, the browns, the yellows that are natural in nature. So if we buy our gear that's bright red or bright orange, it can be a little off-putting to some people. Now, in a primitive aspect of that, those bright flashy colors come in handy, because if you are to walk away from your tent site or you find yourself lost at some point, those bright colors contrast very well with nature, and that contrast allows rescuers to find you more easily. When we go camping, we want to practice what we call leave no trace, which essentially means when you leave your campsite, nobody should be able to recognize where your tent was, where your fire was, or even where your kitchen was. Okay, you want to make sure that everything that you pack in is packed out. So in summary, try to use common sense. Be respectful to others that are around you. Think about the colors that you might choose. And most importantly, take pictures. Remember those moments. Remember the time that you spent out there, because that's where the fun is. And if you take those pictures and you leave only footprints, you've done the best you can. Okay. In this segment, we're going to be covering topic 9, which is the proper use of a knife and a hatchet and the safety that goes with those. In using a knife, you want to make sure that the knife is safe to use as a user. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to inspect our knife. Okay, we're going to take it out of the sheath. We're going to make sure that there's no cracks in the blade, that the handle is full, right? There's no breaks. Okay. If this is a fixed blade, if you have a folding blade, you also want to make sure that the locking mechanism is tight and it's going to hold. Okay? You don't want that blade, that locking mechanism, to fail. So when you go to cut something, it fails. Okay? So again, making sure that that locking works. Another thing we want to make sure is that it's sharp. A dull blade won't cut very well and can cause more injury than a sharp blade. Okay, so we're going to make sure that it's a nice sharp blade. Make sure there's no dings or rolls in the blade edge, in the edge of the blade. Okay, so when you're using a knife, you want to make sure that you as a user are safe, as well as anybody around you. So when you go and use your knife, make sure you have a secure grip on the handle, and you're always pushing away from your body, making sure that your hand is out of the way, making sure your leg's out of the way, and making sure that there isn't anybody that's going around, that if you were to slip, this knife can reach out, okay, and hurt anybody, either yourself or somebody else next to you. Another use is possibly you may need to baton or split some wood with your knife. Now, batoning is not recommended for many blades. A fixed blade is much better than a folding blade, because as you hammer or baton the blade through, you can weaken this locking mechanism and break your knife. So you always want to use a fixed blade if you are going to do batoning. With batoning, you want to make sure that it's thin stuff. You're not trying to chop logs with it. That's what a hatchet or an axe is for. But if you have a thin pieces of wood, batoning can work with a knife. So you want to set your knife up, use another piece of wood. Rocks are going to damage the blade. You're not trying to damage your blade. So another piece of wood to just slightly tap through that little piece of wood. And that's batoning. Another part is to make sure that you have a base plate. You don't want to be putting this batoning straight into the ground. Again, our biggest thing is to protect this tool. And if we damage this blade, this edge, then we've rendered the tool useless. So there may come a time where you need to give your knife to somebody else who needs to use it. Now, there's a proper way to do this. We don't just hand a knife to somebody however we want, okay? So I'm going to demonstrate how to properly pass a knife.
Hey, honey, can I borrow your knife?
Yeah, here you go.
No, no, no. That's not the right way.
Ah, you're right. So I want to hold the blade away, okay? And I hold on the spine, okay? And I can give the handle.
Thank you.
Ah, and I'm also listening to make sure that the person I'm passing it to has control. And how I know they have control is I hear, thank you. So another very important part of passing a knife is you just saw how you can pass it in an open, but there's even a safer way to do this. Most knives have a sheath, or they fold. It's a much safer way to pass a closed blade to somebody.
Thank you.
Again, still listening for confirmation that they have control before you give it back. Thank you. Okay. If it's a fixed blade, put it in the sheath. Okay. And you can hand the sheath. Again, waiting for that confirmation. Secondly, put the knife down. Let them pick it up. You don't need to hand the knife directly to them. You can set it down and walk away, and they can pick up the blade. So a hatchet is a very useful tool, and just like any other tool, we need to make sure that it's safe to use. So we're going to inspect it before we do anything else with it. So we're going to make sure that the handle is clean. A lot of handles are wood, and nobody likes splinters. So you want to make sure that it's smooth, there's nowhere that's going to hurt your hand. We're also going to check the attachment point of the head to the handle, and we're going to make sure that that's secure and there's no wiggle room there. Next, we're going to inspect the edge to make sure that it's sharp. All right, if there's any big chips out of it or rolls and stuff, it's not going to cut very well. It has a chance of bouncing off the piece of wood that you're trying to cut, which can come right back into your face. Okay. Once we've inspected the tool to make sure that it's safe to use, okay, next we need to make sure that we're properly equipped. Okay, so I've got closed-toed shoes on, which is very important. You don't want to be out here in sandals. Next, you want to check your surroundings. Okay, now a tree next to me here. If I was to come up and take a swing overhead, I can get caught. All right, so we want to make sure that we have enough room around us that when we swing, it's free and it's not going to get caught in anything. That also includes any bystanders, making sure that people are at least 30 feet away. All right, so we want to make sure that it's safe to use this tool. So when we use this tool, we want to make sure that we are grounded. When I say by grounded, we want to make sure that we have on level ground, we have our weight distributed between our shoulders, knees slightly bent, okay? And we just want to hold it nice and comfortably, okay? When I come down with this, I want to swing and be able to slide a hand down. This is my anchor, okay? I never am letting go of the hatchet entirely, okay? So this is my anchor to slide down into the piece of wood. So when we use this tool, we want to make sure, check our surroundings, check our swing, okay? And I use another piece of wood to protect the tool from being damaged. So I'm going to place the piece that I want to cut on top. Okay? I'm going to stand back a little bit. I'm going to ground my feet, make sure that they're comfortable, nice and relaxed. I'm going to take a practice swing. Okay? I want to come down. I want to make sure that I'm going to make contact with that piece of wood. Because if I don't make contact and this comes by, I can very easily hit my leg. And that can be very painful. Okay? So once I've checked my swing, okay? And there you have it.
Can you do that again? Nice.
So one of the things we want to talk about too is carrying your axe or your hatchet. And if it doesn't have a sheath and it's an open carry such as this, we want to make sure that we're protecting ourselves and anyone around us. So we hold our axe or our hatchet by the head, and we're keeping the blade facing away from us or down. Right? I don't want to be carrying it with this facing up at me. Okay? And I don't want to be swinging it back and forth, okay? Because that can very easily come into my shin. So we want to hold it secured by the head with it facing out, right? So once that's good, then we can go ahead and walk.
Are you okay?
And that is why we carry it this way, because it goes out and away.
Good job.
In this segment, we're going to cover topic number 7 in your honor. So tents come in all different shapes, sizes, and colors, but one of the things we want to keep in mind when we select a tent is the time of year that we're going out and how many people are going with you. So if you're going out in winter time, you want to make sure that you're looking for a 4-season tent or a tent that has a full rain fly that you can cover as much as possible. The number of people that you're going with will also determine the size of a tent. If you've got you and your family are going, then you want to make sure that there's enough room for everyone to sleep inside. For an example, for myself, when me and my family go camping, I like to have one extra space for the number of people that are going. So there's 3 people in my family, so I would take a 4-person tent. And the reason I take a 4-person tent is I have me, my wife, and my daughter all sleeping in the tent, and I want enough room for our gear to be inside as well. That way we can keep our gear protected from the elements. So today I have a 3-person tent with me, and this is the tent that I take with me when I'm usually going by myself, because when I go by myself I usually bring my dogs, and I want to make sure that there's enough room for them and myself to be comfortable. And these are great heaters that I don't need batteries for. So let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and make sure I have all the parts. Now, you should do this prior to your leaving for your trip. Again, checking your gear is vital to making sure that you're comfortable and you're safe on any camping trip. So I'm going to go through and make sure that I have all the proper pieces to assemble this tent. So the first part is a ground cloth, and a lot of tents nowadays have the option to buy a ground cloth, or what they call a footprint. This is a second layer of protection against moisture and cold in the bottom of your tent. And you'll see where this goes underneath. Next, I've got my poles. Make sure that they're all there. I have 10 stakes. I have my tent body, which is the main tent, and I have the rain fly, which protects you from water, moisture, as well as can help with sun protection, but this gives you 100% waterproof protection. So one other thing is to make sure that if it's a new tent to you, that you want to set it up a couple times at home. Get familiar with it, know how it gets set up, because the last thing you want to do is try and figure that out on the trail when it's an hour before sunset. So knowing how your tent is set up prior to your trip is going to be very helpful for you when you get on your trip. So join me now as we set this up, and you can see how I set this up by myself, and enjoy. So we're going to take a pause here, and we're going to just explain some of the features of this tent specifically. And if you notice, but there's 2 colors that are associated with this tent. And here in the corners, the nice thing is this footprint, which is this piece down here, which is basically a water barrier to protect the bottom of your tent from moisture, as well as protecting it from hard rocks or sticks or anything that might poke through. So it's just a really good way to protect your tent and give it the longest life possible. So here they've color coordinated the corners. So orange with orange and gray with gray. Okay. So it's just a really easy way to help you identify how the tent gets set up just that much quicker. Now, another thing I want to discuss before we do the final setup is location. Now, we don't want to just throw a tent up anywhere, right? Some areas are better than others. So we want to talk about some of the precautions to take into consideration when you choose a tent site. First, I don't know if you can notice, but there's a lot of wind today. And wind is really good. It kind of cools you off when it's a really hot day. But during the nighttime, it can cool you off too much. So what I like to do is I like to observe the wind direction, and you can easily do that by licking your finger, holding it up in the air, and whatever side gets cold, that gives you a wind direction. Now, something to keep in mind, generally the wind direction will switch at night. So right now the wind is blowing from my left to my right, but tonight it may be going from my right to my left. So I need to keep that in mind, that when I set my tent up, I want to orient the tent so my doors aren't facing into the wind. Another precaution to take into consideration is what is above you. So here I'm looking for dead trees. I'm looking for trees that are hanging over that may have the risk of falling. If they were to fall, I don't want to be underneath. So we need to take into consider what is above us, whether it's a dead limb or a dead tree. Another precaution is, if you're in an established campground, most sites have an established fire pit. And we want to make sure that our tent is far enough away to avoid getting embers on it, because we don't want holes in our tent, and at the worst case, we don't want our tent to catch fire. So we want to make sure that our tent is far enough away, at least 30 feet. So now that we have identified a good location, that we're far enough away from our fire, we've looked overhead, everything looks okay, and we understand our wind direction, we can finish orienting our tent accordingly. So join me and we'll finish off the tent. In this segment, we're going to cover topic number 4 of your honor. So here I've got laid out 2 different styles of sleeping bags. Right here, we've got a rectangle bag, which is pretty obvious. It's in the shape of a rectangle. These work really well for kids because it gives a lot of room for them to move around. And they're typically warm enough as well for most summer camping. Here we've got a mummy bag. And some of the key features of a mummy bag, you've got a head box, which helps protect your head for warmth. And it has a foot box, which also confines your feet down and helps keep you warmer at night. Most of these are made of a synthetic or natural down fiber. Some of them are treated to repel moisture as well. And these are typically gonna pack down really nice and tight. And one of the things you need to keep in mind is, if you are gonna go with a synthetic mummy bag or some kind of sleeping bag that has down fill, you want to make sure you give your bag enough time after your day to regain its loft. And what I mean by that is, a lot of these bags have a compression sack, and what that does, it saves space inside your backpack to allow you to carry more gear. but what it does is it gives up its insulation quality when it gets confined down. So get it out. Usually I have the tent set up. So what I'll do is I'll get it out of the bag, shake it up a little bit, toss it up and over, and let it regain its loft. Another type of bag, kind of a hybrid bag or a barrel bag, is kind of takes the features of your mummy bag and the features of your rectangle bag and puts them together. And what it does is it allows you a little bit more insulation, a little bit more comfort, without being confined in what a traditional mummy bag would be. I don't have one to demonstrate, but that's the theory behind it. A sleeping pad is also very important for a comfortable night's sleep. They come in a lot of different shapes, sizes, and it all again depends on what time of year you're going out and how much space you have in your backpack. So here I've got one. This is a air mattress, and I've also got a closed cell self-inflating pad. Obviously, weight is much different, as well as size is much different. All right, you might be wondering why I'm using a bag to inflate this. It's a little time consuming, but the reason I'm doing this is I don't want to introduce moisture into my sleeping pad. Moisture is the enemy of heat. And if I were to use my own breath, there's a lot of moisture and I'd be introducing moisture inside the air chambers in here. So when I slept tonight, obviously that moisture would cool off and take away some of the insulation properties of the sleeping pad. Another reason why I prefer using a bag for inflation is I don't want to introduce anything to this that could cause illness long term. There's a lot of bacteria in our breath as well, so being able to fill this with surrounding air, not my breath, limits the amount of bacteria that could be going into this as well. So even if I were to loan this out to somebody and they decided, hey, I'm going to use my own breath to fill this up, I'm not transmitting or I'm not introducing mold or some kind of other bacteria to a friend of mine if I decide to lend this out later on. Another piece of equipment for sleeping that I highly recommend would be a camping pillow. Now, if you're car camping or you're at an established campground, you can bring your pillow from home. If you're on a backpack trip and space is limited, I'd highly recommend investing into a little camping pillow. It'll save your back, it'll save your neck a whole lot of pain, and it's a great investment. In this segment, we're going to be talking about number 13. Staying warm at night is crucial to not only a comfortable camping trip, but a safe camping trip. And some of the ways that we can do that and guarantee that we're going to stay warm is making sure that we're in dry clothes. One of the things I do is I will actually sleep in the clothes I'm going to wear the next day. So I don't want to sleep in anything that I'm currently wearing. It's a hot day out, I've been sweating. Even a cold day where you maybe don't think that you've been sweating, there's moisture going into your clothing. So if you have clean clothes, new pair of socks, a new warm layer, a nice warm dry hat, those are some of the best ways to stay warm at night. So another way that we can try and keep warm and add some insulation to our bag, we may not all own a 0-degree bag, and maybe we have a 20-degree or a 30-degree bag. And we can add thermal layers with various products on the market that are insulator or thermal sleeping bag liners, such as this one here. We can do the same thing by layering ourselves and wearing multiple layers, long underwear, thermal underwear. However, one of the things we want to make sure is we're not getting compression and we're not restricting blood flow to any part of your body. So using loose fitting clothes is recommended. So the trick to staying warm is to being able to trap air and warm that air. So that's how layering works. By layering your body, you're trapping air in between those layers. And when you warm those layers of air up, that's what creates and gives you that warmth. So the same thing goes with a sleeping bag or sleeping at night. You want to protect yourself with as many layers as you can to give yourself the most air to warm up. Another way to keep ourselves warm at night is to protect ourselves from the ground. The ground is moist and it's going to suck heat away from the body. So using a good air mattress or insulating layer to give yourself protection and an air barrier between the ground is very important. We have a saying that one layer underneath is worth 2 layers on top. In other words, 1 layer of ground insulation is worth 2 layers of air insulation. So keeping yourself protected from the ground is very important. Morning. Hope everyone slept all right. I know I did. These 2 beautiful heaters. Let's start the day. After spending last night in the tent, I forgot to mention a couple things. One is ventilation. This tent actually comes equipped with a vent, which I left open because I knew it was plenty warm last night. But those help with moisture. Moisture can build up on the inside of your tent and actually reduce the ability to stay warm at night. So just thinking about moisture that can build up in the tent, and you want some ventilation to stay warm. So we talked about moisture in the tent. There's one big thing that I forgot to mention yesterday, which with heating your tent, it is very important never to use an open flame or other kind of heating device inside your tent. Whether a camp stove, a candle, that is very, very dangerous, and it should never be done unless your tent is designed to allow for that, or it's an absolute life and death situation. If you're spending multiple nights out in a tent, a good tip for you is to pull your equipment out of the tent and let the tent dry during the day. Now, this is only possible if the weather's really good and you don't have a risk of rain. Obviously, you don't want your gear to get wet from the elements. But if you can pull your gear out and get it dried out throughout the day, you're going to sleep much warmer at night. If you don't have the ability to get your gear out and let it dry throughout the day, a really good way to allow your tent and that gear to dry inside the tent is unclip your rain fly. By folding your rain fly back, it allows the tent to breathe and all that moisture to get out for the next night. A very good feature with most tents is these guidelines. These allow you to stake your tent down whether you're in really high winds or in a snowstorm, but it allows an extra way to secure your tent to the ground. It also allows to pull the rain fly away from the tent a little bit, which gives more ventilation on the inside. A couple other really important tips when you set up your tent is to make sure that the poles are fully inserted. As you saw when I set this up, that it's one pole connected with a kind of a bungee cord. You want to make sure that those connections are all the way in. If they're separated a little bit, you can break and snap those poles and make your tent useless. Another aspect is your stake position. So when I put my stakes and I stake my tent down, I try to go at a nice sharp angle, about a 45-degree angle. And what that does, it puts tension on the tent itself. And if this were to be pulled and tugged, I have more of an angle to pull against. If I do it completely vertical, it's easier for that stake to be drawn and pulled out. So we're all set, we're ready to leave. So it's important that when we take our tent down, think of a couple things. One, is the tent wet? Did it rain overnight? Or is there morning dew that's still in the tent? So if it's a wet tent, we can either try and let it dry out if the weather's still good, or if we have to pack it away wet, we want to make sure as soon as we get home, we get that out, we lay it out and let it dry. If we put our tent away wet, it has a very high tendency to mold, and then you won't be used again. One thing I wanted to mention when I'm taking this down is you'll notice I'm pushing the pole through the tent versus pulling the pole. And that's just going to help keep your pole nice and tight together, all those connections, and it's going to avoid it coming apart inside the tent. Now once I've got the rainfly off and put away, I want to make sure that I get the bottom of the tent cleaned out as well. And the best way that I know to do that is to unstake all the corners. And this tent is light enough that I can actually lift it up. I can kind of shake it, leaving one of the doors open, and most of the dirt and stuff will come out. So as you saw when I strike my tent, is I collect everything I'm taking off into one location. That's really important when leaving no trace, and to make sure that when I set my tent up again, I have brought all my equipment with me. So as we mentioned before, when we set up the tent, to take the time at home to set it up, get to know your tent. It also helps when you strike your tent, making sure that you collect all the pieces and know how it fits back into the bag. A lot of times we can take it out, but it doesn't go back in the same way. In this segment, we're going to cover topic number 3. One of the easiest ways people get lost is by going off the trail. And this can be for various reasons. But if you find yourself lost, the first thing to do, try not to panic. As you can see, panicking doesn't accomplish anything positive. Which brings me to my next point, pray. You may not know where you are, but I guarantee you our Father in heaven knows exactly where you are. Now that we've taken a moment to pray, let's take a moment to assess the situation. We do that by first staying put. We don't want to be running around in a panic. Second, let's listen. Maybe we can hear other campers. Maybe we can hear our fire. Maybe we can hear a water feature or a road. Maybe there's cars going by. So let's use our senses. So we've got our ears. Let's look around. If you're out backpacking, maybe your tent is bright colored like we talked about earlier, and maybe you can see it. So using our eyes, maybe there's something that, oh hey, I remember seeing that tree when I was on the trail. So look around. And then let's call. If you have a way to use a whistle, you can use your mouth. Call out. See if anybody nearby can hear you. Maybe they can guide you right back to where you think you got lost. Let's check our gear. Let's see what we might have. Maybe we have a map and compass. Maybe we've got our cell phone with us. Maybe we have a device that I can call for emergencies. So let's check our gear. So if none of those techniques have gotten you out of your situation yet, you might want to start looking for a vantage point. And that can be climbing a tree or a nearby hillside. Again, it's important not to leave your spot. So if you can set up an anchor, your anchor, whether it's your clothing, your backpack, like we mentioned, so you can always come back to where you were. It's going to be more advantageous for you to stay where you are for rescuers to find you. So I want to show you how you can do this. I'm going to use my hat because it contrasts really well with the green. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few paces in one direction, see if I can find the trail. At all times, you want to make sure that you can always see your anchor. You can repeat that same process in a 360-degree pattern as long as you can always see your anchor. So if you haven't been found yet, it's probably a good time to start thinking about setting up camp. And one of the best ways to be found at night is with a fire. So if you have a means of making fire, I highly recommend that being your first step. It's going to keep you warm and it's going to make you visible at night. If you don't have a way of making fire, then you need to figure out a way to stay warm, so shelter is probably your second option. In summary, here are the 10 things that we covered. Don't panic. Take time to pray. Stay put. Listen. Look. Call. Check your gear. Try and relocate the trail. Look for a vantage point. And finally, set up camp. So today we're going to show you a great bread recipe that you can do over an open fire, either in your backyard or in your next camping trip. Go.
Okay, in helping my husband make bread on a stick, we're gonna make a quick recipe of bread so he can bake it on a stick. So we have almost a cup of water. This water is nice and warm. It is about 7/8 of a cup of water, so it's not quite full. And 1 teaspoon of yeast. I'm gonna bloom this here, which is only a fancy word for saying that you're letting the yeast start to work. So I'm only using a regular bread yeast in flakes. I'm getting a wooden spoon and I'm gonna use the handle just to give it a good mix. This doesn't have to sit here for a long time. It's just while I gather the rest of the ingredients. Okay, so that's that. Now we need sugar. And this recipe calls for a teaspoon of sugar. So I'm gonna use the same teaspoon. I'm just gonna get, hold on, that's at the bottom. 1 teaspoon of sugar in my bowl. And I'm gonna get 1 teaspoon of salt in there. Super simple. Now, olive oil. It's 2 tablespoons of olive oil. So there's a tablespoon. I have olive oil here. So there's 1 tablespoon. 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And now flour. So before I put the flour in, I'm gonna put in the yeast mixture. Try to get all of the yeast into the bowl. Let's put all that together over there. And I'm gonna use this handle to dilute the sugar and the salt there in here and mix it all up. For the flour, we're gonna need 2 cups of flour. So here's a measurement of 1 cup. This is regular flour, it doesn't have to be bread flour. So a correct measurement for a cup is not overflowing like this. It needs to be nice and flat. So you can use your finger, a knife, the handle of a spoon, okay, like that, into the bowl. Again, another one. Perfect. Into the bowl. Okay. Using the same handle, now we're gonna mix it in everything. This bread is not gonna get dry. It's not gonna be a super dry bread, and it's not gonna be a bread that you need to sit here for hours kneading it. You also don't need a machine to be kneading it for you. You just want to put everything together using your handle. Once you have everything like this forming, you see it's already forming a ball. You're just gonna come in and knead just slightly so you can gather all the ingredients. Okay, since you guys are gonna be camping, you probably won't have foil or saran wrap with you guys, okay? Do you see it's a sticky dough, okay? I put my hands and it's sticky. It's not gonna get super dry, okay? So you form a little ball, and I'm gonna use this cloth that I have over here. I'm just gonna move everything to the side. And I'm gonna fold that in half. And I'm gonna use this to cover the bread. And now it's gonna sit here and rise for about an hour or until it doubles. So you might find yourself in the woods camping and it's a super hot day. You can set it close to a warm spot. I do not recommend it putting in direct sunlight because that could kill your yeast. You want the heat, not the sun. So put it in a nice warm spot, maybe near your fire, and let it rise, let it double. When it's doubled, then Andrew will take over and show you guys how to wrap it around the stick and put it over the fire.
You've already seen the video of my wife making the recipe for this bread. So now that we're outside and it's risen beautifully, we're gonna finish it off and bake it in the fire.
Okay.
All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna knock the air out of it. And then we're gonna pull it away from the bowl and give it a couple quick kneads or folds.
Can I, Daddy? Can I?
Very nice. Next, we're just gonna pinch off a piece.
Pinched off a piece.
Okay. And if you got a nice little board or a rock, you're just gonna roll it out into a nice. Now for the fun part, trying to get it to stick on the stick. We got a little elongated here. And we're just gonna slowly wrap it. All right, so once you've got it on your stick, we're gonna put it over the fire. Now, with the fire, you're looking for coals. So you're gonna have to let the fire burn for a little while to get down to nice and coals. If you do have a little flame, then you just wanna make sure that the stick is a little bit higher. You're looking for the heat, not for the flame. Moment of truth.
Look at that crunch.
That's a beautiful recipe.
Daddy, can
So now with our bread behind us baking, it's a great opportunity to clean up from making the bread. So out camping, we don't have access to a sink usually. So at a campground, they usually provide water at your site or at the central bathhouse where you can go and you can wash your dishes. You definitely want to make sure that you've got soap. Please use biodegradable or camp soap is really good. It's a lot better for the environment. So we just want to take every opportunity we can to just make sure that our dishes, our utensils stay clean. So here I've got set up a bucket of soapy water and a bucket of rinse water, as my daughter loves water.
And keeps putting soap in it.
So we're just going to take our bowl that we use for the bread. Can you put that in there and wash that out for me?
Yep.
Awesome. This is a great way to get your kids involved as well.
It's better to have a sponge.
Okay. You can use a little bit of sand. Sand will work really well. Charcoal from your fire will work as just like a little bit of an abrasive element to help scrape off the leftover food. All right, once you've got all that, then you can go to your other bucket, rinse it off.
I want to rinse off my hands. I want to rinse my hands.
Okay, at this point, if you have paper towel or a drying cloth, you can go ahead and dry it. One of the best ways I like is just to let it air dry. So if you have a way to hang it up, a lot of utensils have a little hole that you can hang them up with, or a little clip, and let the UV light from the sun do its job. A couple of extra things if you want to make sure that your dishes are really clean. Hot water is a great way to do that. And so if you had a fire going, you can boil up some water. Now, with boiling water, you want to be very careful because that can burn you. So if you're going to add it to your water, make sure that you add the cold water to the bucket first, and then you add your hot water. It happens every once in a while where hot water goes in first and somebody comes behind you and goes to dip their hands or drop their dishes in, and they can get hurt. And so we want to avoid that as much as possible. So if you're the type of person that doesn't like doing dishes, there's a couple ways around that. And one is to use disposables. Obviously this is a little bit more pricey because you're gonna have to pay for the disposable ware. But it also means that you have to make sure that you pick up every piece of trash that you bring in. So if you're doing several nights on a backpacking trip and you have a fork for every night, that's a lot of trash that you're gonna be carrying with you. So just keep that in mind. If you're in a campground, it probably isn't so bad because you're able to throw it away every night. Another workaround is making your own tools or making your own utensils. So just a little bit of creativity and you can make some chopsticks. Oops. I've made a spoon, spatula, and if you have a lot of time on your hands, even a little mortar and pestle.
Yeah.
Pestle. In this segment, we're going to cover topic number 10. Fires for me are the best part about any camping trip. When we have a campfire, there's a lot of precautions we need to take before we strike that match. So first is location. How do we know where is a safe place to build a fire? If you're going to a campground, there's usually an established fire ring, like there is here behind me. This is an absolute must. Please, if available, use an established fire pit. If you don't have an established fire pit available to you, then you're gonna have to create one. And there's a lot of safety precautions you need to take to prepare your site. So when you go and build your fire, we need to take into consideration where that fire is gonna go. So first thing we need to look for is overhead. So is there trees above us? Is the underbrush overhanging enough where that could catch fire? So we need to check above us. Then we also want to clear about a 10-foot radius around that fire pit. So wherever your fire pit is, you want 10 feet in either direction, just clear of any brush, or easily combustible materials such as pine needles and leaves. So as you're digging, most of you are gonna find roots. Now, usually you wouldn't think too much about a root and it's just an annoyance to get out of the way. But when it comes to fires, we need to take special precautions with roots because we can actually light these on fire and the ember will actually travel through the root all the way back to the main tree. Yeah. So we want to take special precaution when we take roots out. And I'll show you how we do that. So once you've established the size, and most of the time you don't need a big fire pit. So once you establish the size of it, the loose material that you have, found another root. So the roots we're gonna pull back as far as we can before we cut them off and get them out of the way. So we're gonna take this loose material that we've dug up and we're gonna line the sides of our new pit. And we wanna make sure that there's no roots sticking through. And you want to make sure that you leave a little bit down on the bottom as well so you protect the bottom. So now we're establishing a fire ring by placing rocks all the way around. And this acts as a fire barrier for embers to make sure that if a spark happens and it casts embers out, that hopefully the rocks will catch that and it won't spread.
Good job, Zoe.
Rocks, there's more rocks here.
one.
Go on, Zoe. Get them.
Okay, I got them. One there. Put one here. Hey, give me those. Give me the other ones. Give me the other ones. Hand them to me and I'll put them. One more.
One more?
Oh, wow.
Well, it's a beautiful ring. Come on.
Yes, it is.
Yay! It's stylish.
Very stylish. Just like you, huh? In your socks and sandals?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She knows all about style, right, Daddy?
Yeah. So to keep with the motto of leave no trace, we're gonna just put this all back together so you can see what that really means. So pretend with me here that we've had our fire and we're moving on. So we want to make sure that one, the fire is completely dead. So water, water, water. And if you can put your hand in there and you can't feel anything, that's usually a good sign. But if you can feel any heat anywhere, I like to use the back of my hand preferably. It's a little bit more sensitive. If I can feel any heat with the back of my hand, I know it's still not out. So assuming that the fire is completely dead, we're going to collapse this ring and put it all back. And if you notice, when I first dug it, I took what we call the sod, the top layer, and I put it to the side. If I was here for several days, I'd make sure to put water on that as well to keep that alive. But because we're just doing it for a really quick fire, whether it's just maybe cooking lunch for us, so we're gonna just put a few of the rocks back in. All right, some of the ones that we dug out. Okay, and if I took rocks from around, I want to put those rocks back where I found them, if I can. All right, I want to put the rocks back where I found them. Okay.
I'm gonna get the big one because.
Okay, and you'll put the big one somewhere. Okay, so once I've filled it in a little bit, just gonna make sure that all the dirt is there.
Look at this.
Then I'm gonna take that sod that I
Be careful
saved,
not to drop it.
and I'm gonna put it right back in place. Try to tuck it in a little bit. Make sure you pat it down, try to get it nice and tight in there for you. So once we have a ring established and we're ready to go, we need to make sure before we strike that first match that we have a way of putting the fire out. And the best way to do that is water. So as you can see here, I've got a bucket ready to go with water. I've got a rake nearby if I need to, and sand or dirt will also work. Just make sure it's clean and it's not full of leaves and needles that are gonna ignite. I want to take a moment here and just talk about the #1 rule when it comes to fires as far as don'ts. Don't use gas or other types of accelerants. It's very dangerous and nobody wants to get burned. So please do not use accelerants. Another precaution that we need to consider is the weather. Now, if it's been really dry the last few days or if it's really windy, then maybe having a fire isn't a smart move, because embers can very quickly be blown out of the fire and onto dry wood and cause a forest fire, and nobody wants to have a forest fire. Before we build any campfire, we need to make sure we get permission. And this can come from the campground that you're at, calling your local fire department, or even the Forest Service, just to make sure that it's okay to have a fire, because nobody wants to be responsible for starting a forest fire. Building a fire can be difficult, but building a fire with wet wood is even harder. So we want to take every precaution we can to protect our wood from getting wet. And some of the best ways to do that is using a tarp, or our tent, or the trunk of our car, or even under the car. Any way that you can protect the firewood from getting wet, it's going to help in making a fire. All right, so what I have set up here is I have a little fire starter, So I use birch bark as my tinder to catch the flame of the match. And then I have little twigs on top to catch that. And I have twigs and larger kindling as we move up. Now when you strike a match, it's very important to remember a couple things. One, you want to keep these protected. So I haven't opened this until I'm ready to light. So we're going to take our match out. We'll find our striker. Okay. We always strike away from the body. Okay. You also want to make sure there's no bystanders around. So you don't want your friends sitting next to you as well. So we're always striking away from the body. Second thing we need to worry about is wind direction. So if wind is blowing at me, if this is my only match and I strike it and I've got the wind blowing right in my face, I'm going to put my match out and I'm not going to get a fire. So what I can do is I can use my body as a windbreak. So it's hitting me in the back and I'm protecting my match. So when we're going like this, we're going to get down nice and low. I don't want to be up here, okay? Because then my match might run out before I get it even to my fire. So I want to get down low. We'll strike away from me. I want to let it ignite and stick it in the fire. Pull away. Make sure that your matches also go away. You don't want those to catch fire either. And then I'm just going to slowly tend this with kindling until I can move up to bigger material. One of the things that amazes me so much about being out in the woods is the different types of trees. They can be really thin, they can be huge and thick, they can be really tall, really short. They have needles, they have leaves, they have smooth bark or rough bark. They come in all different types, yet they all serve the same purpose, which is to purify the air that we breathe. And just like they are all unique and different and serving the same purpose, so are we. We are all here to do the same thing, which is to bring the love of Christ to the world. So as I finish this bread off tonight, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for joining me as we went through Camping Skills 1. I hope you learned a lot. I had a lot of fun being with you. I know I wasn't able to cover everything. There's a lot of information out there, and I encourage you to take your time, do your research, and if you have the opportunity, do as much as you can at home. Practice at home. If you have a little outdoor fire pit, if you have a little bit of yard, throw your tent up several times if you can. The more time that you're able to practice these skills in a controlled environment, the more prepared you're going to be when you're actually out in the woods and your life may depend on it. So enjoy camping. I grew up camping myself, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to just enjoy God's beautiful creation. Thank you again for joining me, and hope everyone stays safe. Bye.